As we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the signing of the OAS Inter-American Charter, I wanted to convene a hearing to assess the progress of democracy in the Hemisphere, to highlight where it is strong and vibrant, as well as where there remains progress to be made. All the countries in the region, save one, adhere to a democratic form of government. We celebrate that achievement, and we seek to further solidify the pillars of democracy: fair and free elections, the independent operation of the legislative and executive branches, an independent judiciary, respect for civil society, and the ability of the press to operate freely. As we have made progress in our country during more than 200 years of constitutional rule, so has Latin America. Whereas in the 1980s we saw dictatorial rule, the norm is now competitive elections that are free and fair. We see transfers of power and alternation in power between parties of the right and the left. Brazil, Chile, and Uruguay have made great strides in the quality of democracy over the past 30 years. Chile, a country rated as not free in 1981 under the criteria used by Freedom House, is today rated as free. Likewise, Brazil and Uruguay, rated partly free in 1981, are rated as free today. In total, Freedom House today rates 22 countries as free and 10 as partly free. So there is work to be done among the countries that are partly free, in Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, to mention a few. But in most cases, the trends are positive. Of particular concern are those countries that are rated as free were rated as free in 1981, but are now only rated as partially free, such as in Venezuela. Let me just mention a few concerns of mine. One of those is the tendency towards centralization of power. In the 1980s, the military in many countries ruled under authoritarian rule, issuing decrees instead of allowing for the elaboration of laws. Today, the trend is toward extension of term limits. We see that trend in Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, and recently in Paraguay. In Guatemala, the presidential candidate took an unusual route to ensure her eligibility for the president, divorcing her spouse, President Colom, in order, as she put it, to marry her country. Perhaps such a move is technically legal, but it clearly circumvents the spirit of the law. Even Colombia passed a law to allow a third term for its president, but the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional. A second concern is respect for civil society and the independent voices of the citizenry, the right to criticize one's government without fear of reprisal. In some countries, voices are physically constrained, whereas in others the effort has become more opaque. Using laws and regulations to frustrate, constrain, and undermine the operation of civil society by imposing barriers to prevent their registration, their operations, or access to resources. The most strident case in this regard, except for Cuba, is Venezuela. In December 2010, the Venezuelan National Assembly passed legislation that restricts civil society organizations that, quote, defend political rights, or, quote, monitor the performance of public bodies from obtaining international funding. The law is in direct violation of Article 13 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights Defenders, which states explicitly that, quote, everyone has the right, individually and in association with others, to solicit, receive, and utilize resources for the express purpose of promoting and protecting human rights. A third concern is that of freedom of expression. In Central America, journalists that cover drug trafficking, corruption, and organized crime face threats to their lives that often result in self-censorship. In Argentina, government attempts to control the press have masqueraded as regulatory controls. So today I hope to hear from our witnesses on what we are doing and what we can do to preserve and deepen the gains that have been made in the last 30 years, and what we are doing to foster strong democratic institutions, respect for civil society and the media, to ensure that on the 20th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, that all the nations of our hemisphere will share in the political and economic benefits that are derived from a vibrant democracy.